On this edition of Independent Sources, the watch list. The effort to curb landlords who over-leverage their properties and force out their tenants. And sowing the seeds of technology. A new media artist wants to close the gender gap in science and technology through a series of do-it-yourself kits.
Independent Sources, your window to the city's ethnic and immigrant communities. Here's your host, Garry Pierre-Pierre.
A bill has been introduced in the New York City Council that will create a watch list of companies and landlords that are known to have employed predatory equity practices to force out their tenants. Many residents have complained that as the city's affordable housing market has dwindled, landlords have resorted to measures such as deferring building maintenance and adding on illegal rent fees as a means of pushing them out of their homes. The bill was introduced by Democratic City Councilman Richie Torres, who joins me in studio today along with Carrie White. Ms. White is the Director of Organizing, Policy and Research at the Urban Homesteading Assistance Board. UHAB is a nonprofit that empowers low to moderate income residents and creates strong tenant associations. Welcome. Councilman Torres, why did you think that this bill was necessary at this time?
I'm concerned about the affordability crisis here in New York City. And a little context, the nature of the crisis has evolved over time. In the 1970s, we saw a crisis of disinvestment. In our own time, our crisis is one of speculative investment. And one of the main drivers of speculation here in New York City, which is rising rents, is predatory equity. And predatory equity exists when you have private equity firms using huge amounts of private capital, huge amounts of debt to buy up huge amounts of affordable housing for the purpose of making it unaffordable. And the defining fact about these real estate transactions is that the debt levels are based not on the actual rents that tenants pay presently, but based on the projected rents that tenants could pay, higher income tenants could pay potentially. So the very success of a predatory equity transaction depends on displacement, depends on using the tactics of harassment to displace tenants with lower incomes and lower rents in favor of tenants with higher incomes and higher rents. And
so you feel that there's possibility of abuse, or there actual abuse right now, and hence the bill that you've introduced?
Well, it can be a challenge to detect predatory equity, but it's not an academic question. We saw in the height of the credit boom in the mid-2000s, the sheer destruction and the pace of destruction that predatory equity can bring to affordable housing. The most egregious example was Stuytown. You had Stuytown in Peter Cooper Village. You had a real estate firm that bought it for about $5.6 billion. The vast majority of it was debt, bank debt, mezzanine debt, and it was predicated on tripling the rental income in a matter of 5 years. Now, anyone who's familiar with rent-regulated housing knows that rent-regulated housing has notoriously low vacancy rates. So you cannot dramatically raise the rental levels unless you have an intent to harass. And in the case of Stuytown, the real estate firm had to default on the debt within a matter of 5 years.
Okay. So, Carrie, can you give us some example of these predatory practices in your work?
Right. So we see tenants mostly in, as the council member mentioned, rent-stabilized housing. So these aren't just buildings that have no protections on them. These are buildings that usually either have some legal or regulatory protections like rent regulation, or buildings that have subsidies, government subsidies on them that are particularly victims of this crisis. So for these tenants, they usually have protections that they have a right to stay in their apartments. That's the main protection that rent regulation gives tenants. So if a landlord can't force a tenant to leave just because they want to, then they have to resort to these other practices.
Such as?
A lot of what we see is buyout offers trying to buy tenants out of their leases, refusing to make repairs in the apartments where they want tenants to leave, taking tenants to court frivolously. A newer tactic that we've seen in the last couple of years is what we call construction as harassment, where because the benefit that these landlords want is to renovate vacant units and bring in higher paying tenants. So when they do get a tenant to leave, when they get a long-term rent-stabilized tenant to leave, they really want to spend a lot of money to renovate that unit. But they can do it in a way, these landlords can and often do this work in a way that has a negative impact on the other residents in the building, like causing roofs to collapse, ceilings to collapse, leaks throughout the building, cutting off essential services like water or phone lines. And this just kind of puts on an additional pressure on those tenants who are trying to fight for their homes, that now they're living in this situation. So then they're more likely to maybe take the buyout, to, have a hard time fighting their landlord, continually going to court. So those are the tactics that we see most often.
But Councilman Torres, there should already be laws in the books to protect tenants from these practices, aren't there?
There are none. I mean, even though the city acknowledges that over-leveraging is one of the best predictors of harassment, there's no real proactive or predictive approach to enforcing the housing maintenance code. So I'm introducing legislation that would require the Department of Housing Preservation and Development to create a watch list of owners and lenders who engage in predatory equity, who over-leverage their buildings. So if you over-leverage your buildings, we could target those properties for proactive enforcement.
Is this a list of shame, or does it have any teeth to it, where someone who violates the rules, the laws, can be prosecuted?
Well, the watch list is about disclosure. I think sunlight is the best disinfectant, and the point of the watch list is to shine a harsh light on some of the darkest corners of the real estate market.
But a lot of these people are unscrupulous business owners to begin with. Is shaming them effective enough to remedy the problem?
Well, transparency is the beginning, but not the end of accountability.
Okay.
And the second legislation I'm introducing would establish over-leveraging, predatory equity, as a form of harassment. So if you over-leverage a building egregiously, there is a presumption that you are engaging in harassment and you're subject to litigation in court. Tenants would have a private right of action that could be brought against the landlord.
I mean, you mentioned over-leverage a few times. I mean, we have an idea what that means, but in the real estate market, quickly, can you tell us what that means exactly?
Excessive debt. So if you have more debt than income, if you have more debt than the building can support, then the property is over-leveraged.
Okay.
And when you have an over-leveraged property, there are only 3 possible scenarios, all of which endanger affordability.
Okay.
Right? Either you have the displacement of affordable housing tenants in favor of market rate tenants, or you have deferred maintenance resulting in disrepair, or you have foreclosure. Okay. In each of those scenarios, affordable housing is at risk.
Okay. So, Garry, what's behind this? I mean, is the housing boom, is it a sort of like boom time for developers and they're trying to make as much money as possible, or what's going on?
I think there's a lot of issues that are leading to this. We are in New York City in particular, we're experiencing increased population at levels that we haven't seen recently. As the population continues to increase, there is this strain on the housing that exists. I think that this speculation is really a big problem. And so what this is these are people who are gambling on our affordable housing, on our resources here in New York. And so they see, especially in gentrifying areas, they see housing where currently residents are paying because they're protected by these rent regulation laws or other regulations, where tenants are paying relatively low rent. But they think, in a free market, if there were no restrictions on these buildings, somebody might pay twice or 3 times that much in rent per month. So they're buying at a level that is only supportable if people end up paying twice or 3 times the rent. And so that really puts them at a place that they have to achieve those financials. They're putting on too much debt, so they owe money to the banks, they owe money to their institutional investors, and they're really putting themselves in a situation where in order to make their deal successful, they have to displace tenants. And if they can't displace tenants, which they can only do in rent regulation at the levels that they're trying by thwarting the laws that exist in New York, and if they can't achieve that, then the building ends up going into financial distress, which will probably result in bad conditions or in eventually default, which we've seen here in New York. We saw which predatory equity started to be a problem in New York in the middle of the 2000s with the first housing boom, and we saw the repercussions. Hundreds, like of thousands of units across the city were affected by this. Many buildings, hundreds of buildings went into foreclosure. Conditions deteriorated and tenants really suffered. And so we're seeing the rise of this speculation again. And like I said, I think it's people being a little too, their presumptions of how much money they can make in this market is off. Their understanding of what the laws are is often skewed, because the other thing that should be said here is this is a different type of landlord than people might be thinking of. These aren't people who live in New York City, who are buying a building that they live in, or somebody who's buying some other buildings they have a family owned. Right, and often international. We work with buildings that are owned by companies based in Sweden, based in Australia, based in other parts of the country. They don't understand, or they might not understand, the laws that they're going to have to come up against in order to achieve the returns they're looking for.
All right, thanks. We'll do right now for a break. We'll have more with Councilman Torres and Carrie White after this. Thanks for staying tuned. I'm speaking with Councilman Richie Torres and Carrie White of the nonprofit tenant advocacy organization, the Urban Homesteading Assistance Board. Carrie, earlier, before the break, you were talking about the ownership of these buildings, and you said some of them are international in nature. How does that work exactly? How do these companies bundle these financing to get these buildings? Excuse me.
So it happens in several ways. So first of all, when we're talking about predatory equity, we're talking about the fact that there's often private equity. So private equity is money that's usually raised by investments. So a lot of times they can come from big private equity firms like Lone Star, like BlackRock. These kind of companies often raise funds to purchase real estate. It's a huge institutional investment opportunity to buy real estate.
So basically they go all over the world, wherever they can find investors, they take the money.
They can take the money and they say, if you give me, I'm a company, I buy real estate in New York, and they often use very coded languages. We're looking for undervalued assets. We're looking for opportunistic neighborhoods. This is a fast-paced growing neighborhood here in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. And this building right now, it's all rent stabilized, and the average rents are $1,500 a month, but people will move into Crown Heights and pay 2 times that much.
Sure.
So these companies give institutional investors to invest in them. They use that money coupled with debt that's either bank debt or sometimes is more private equity type capital debt to purchase the buildings with the intention of following through on these promises to get these high returns.
Sure. So, Councilman Torres, are there specific neighborhoods targeted by these companies, and also has any of them been brought on any charges since this started the last several years?
Well, you might be tempted to think that predatory equity is confined to the neighborhoods most associated with gentrification, whether it's neighborhoods in Manhattan or Brooklyn. But in fact, the Bronx was ground zero for predatory equity.
Why is that?
In the mid-2000s.
Why is that?
Because these predatory investors are attempting to engineer gentrification rather than have it happen naturally.
Okay.
They're making conscious investments decisions in the hopes of displacing families and raising rent levels in those neighborhoods.
So, no, go ahead, continue.
And I think Kerry mentioned a key word, which is undervalued asset. What normal people like you and I see as affordable housing, predatory investors view as an undervalued asset, and harassment is how they unlock what they see as the hidden value of affordable housing. And so the main concern here is the fusion of Main Street with Wall Street, the fusion of private capital with affordable housing. It could have real consequences for the affordability of our city.
So what is under your bill, what's being put in place so that the City Department of Housing and Preservation and Development can actually enforce and oversee this list, once these landlords are put on this list? So what mechanism is there to ensure that, these people are following the law?
I think the problem with housing code enforcement is that it tends to be late and reactive rather than early and preventative. You know, if you have a condition in your apartment or if the building is falling into disrepair, you submit complaints to 311, and HPD has a whole host of programs that respond to those conditions. I think what we're proposing is, why wait until the building falls into disrepair? If we know that the building has more debt than income, we should target those properties for predictive enforcement. Just like you have
Minority Report.
predictive policing in law enforcement, we should have predictive code enforcement in the domain of housing.
And
Well, it's not Minority Report because the very act of over-leveraging a property is a form of harassment, right? The inevitable
but that's part.
consequence.
Let me push back a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how capitalism works. I mean, there's a lot of industries that are over leveraged and whatnot. So, is that a crime in itself?
It is, yes, because if your real estate transaction is predicated on violating the law, then that's not a normal exercise of capitalism. The problem with predatory equity is that it thrives on lax underwriting standards, low interest rates, but above all, large loopholes in the rent laws.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're exploiting those loopholes, or if you're illegally harassing tenants to make your transactions financially viable, that is not just capitalism at work, that's criminal behavior at work.
Okay.
And I would say that there are in other industries ways to combat bad practices. Like you can't buy a restaurant and serve rat meat because it's cheaper than chicken.
Is it?
Well, I don't know. I feel like in the subway I see them a lot. So I think there are other industries where we've seen things happen, where we see controls. The fact is, I don't know if we're not adequately expressing that the practices these landlords use often put people at extreme peril, put families in dangerous conditions inside their homes, may put families in dangerous conditions where people are getting sick because of either problems, lack of heat, hot water, especially in the winter, is a huge problem that we see in a lot of these buildings, or put families at risk of becoming homeless if they get displaced. This is not just saying, we're mad because this person bought this building, we'd rather somebody else had bought it. Like, people are really at extreme risk in these buildings, and so we have to be able to stand up to that. And I think, again, New York City instituted rent regulation because they decided, our forebears in the city and the state decided that there needed to be protections for renters in the city, that the free market doesn't work in New York City the way it might work other places. I would argue right now, where we are as a country, I think we've come to realize that affordable housing is a bigger conversation than we've been willing to have,
Yes,
both
indeed.
nationally and in the city. But have recognized here in New York, and that's why the rent regulation laws were instituted in the first place. And so now we can't say, oh, well, we don't want to have anything to do with the purchase price if we know that this has a direct effect on landlords thwarting the laws that exist and really putting families at risk.
Okay. So, Councilwoman Torres, this is something special to you. Can you tell us about your personal experience with this issue?
Look, I'm the youngest elected official in New York City.
Yes,
I
you
would
are.
not be where I am, but for affordable housing.
Okay.
Like, I grew up with the peace of mind knowing that I had a permanent, stable, affordable place to live. And affordable housing is the foundation for upward mobility. And the most important fact to know about predatory equity is that it means the destruction of affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it's so critical for us to fight it.
How soon do you expect this bill to become the law?
We are facing opposition from HPD and from the city.
Interesting. Why?
Whenever you're insisting that bureaucracies go outside their comfort zone,
Mm-hmm.
and you're bound to provoke some resistance, but that's just the natural sclerosis of government at work.
Okay. And so, having said that, are you optimistic that your bill will pass?
We're determined,
Okay.
and if ever the stakes were high, it's now.
What kind of support are you getting in the council, or also from organizations like CARES?
We have widespread support among tenants and among local elected officials who are on the ground and who know what is at stake. I mean, during the financial crisis, there were about 100,000 units plagued by predatory equity. It's about 10% of the rent-regulated stock. That's an astonishing scale of affordable housing instability. And so every elected official, every tenant organization, our mission is to promote stability in our neighborhoods, which means fighting predatory equity.
Unfortunately, we have to end the conversation there. Thanks to Councilman Richie Torres and Kerry White of the Urban Homesteading Assistance Board. When we come back, a new media artist is sowing the seeds of technology in a fascinating way. Finally, from us, a new media artist is trying to make mothers technology role models for their daughters. She's created do-it-yourself kits that bring mothers and their daughters together to create their own complex electrical circuits. Judith Escalona tells us more.
I want to encourage to lots of mother and their daughter, or even their kids and parents, working together, and they'll make their own craft together, and they learn more, and they spend more pressure time together.
New media artist Ji-Sun Lee is on a mission to close the gender gap in science and technology, where men worldwide vastly outnumber women. She hopes to do this through her tech DIY projects.
Tech DIY project is a very simple concept to mother explain the electronic circuit to their daughter when they're working together with the sewing circuit project. So mother can be the different kinds of role model about the science. So that's my original idea. It can be the influence to their kids, to the mother can be the different kinds of role model in science and technology area. So I want to change that kind of the preconception about the gender.
Lee, who holds a PhD in interaction design from Seoul National University and a master's from NYU's Interactive Telecommunications program, began developing her tech DIY kits as her thesis project. In 2008, she presented her first prototypes at the Maker Faire in San Francisco. Maker Faire is an annual expo of do-it-yourself DIY projects in the arts, crafts, engineering, and sciences.
My mother, who doesn't speak any English, and she never been in America. My 3-year-old daughter, we went to Maker Faire together. We had a really great time. My mother was very exciting about the Maker Faire, what I'm doing, because it's a very a new concept and we can work together. So she helped me to making the sewing project together. And yeah, it was a really great memory in my life.
Her daughter Hannah, who has grown up using the kits and also contributing her ideas, was with her mother at the 2016 Maker Faire, recently held in Queens, New York.
This is my first project, and I made a snail eye when I was in first grade. I learned about sewing and basic circuit. I learned how to connect LEDs and batteries.
Here's how it works. The kits substitute regular cotton thread with conductive thread that allows an electrical current to flow. Lee then creates different projects with increasingly elaborate electrical circuits sewed into cutout felt patterns.
This is called the UFO with the 5-5 timer. It's the most complicated circuit from my project. And you can use the IC chip. And simple IC chip is a 5-5 timer in here used. And this is a 5-5 timer and changing the interval of the lighting and sounds. So if I press in here, and you can see there's some beeping and lighting. So if you change the register in here, you can change the interval actually. So like a beep, 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 or beep, 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 beep.
She chose sewing patterns because it was how she spent time with her mom when she was a child. In Korea, children are required to learn how to sew in school. Sewing assignments can involve elaborate pieces of clothing. As a child, Lee often needed her mother's assistance to complete her homework. With over 50 workshops and presentations under her belt, Ji-Sun Lee recently published Make, Tech DIY Easy Electronics Projects for Parents and Kids. It's a how-to manual on how to create your own tech DIY projects, from creating a simple circuit to programming a board game. Though it targets mothers and daughters, the tech DIY projects can also help boys learn about electrical circuits with their moms. Judith Escalona, Independent Sources.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Till next time, be independent-minded.